There were whispers in every saloon from Red Creek to Timberfall Ridge about only one man, Silas McGraw, the mountain recluse no woman could endure. Some said he was 7 feet tall, others swore he had bear blood flowing through his veins. Children would dare each other to run to the edge of his territory, declaring that whoever made it past his fence and back was the bravest of them all. Silas himself didn't care for what people said, he preferred wolves over women and silence over speech. He lived alone in a weather-beaten log cabin halfway up Grizzly Peak, surviving on elk meat, river trout, and pure stubbornness. His beard hung like a tangle of wild ivy, he wore the same patched fur coat year-round, and his voice, the few times it surfaced, came out like gravel grinding on stone. But no matter how fiercely he guarded his solitude, the law did not care for legends or tempers. When a mining company caught wind of valuable iron veins beneath his land, they tried to claim ownership under new development laws. Silas fought back, nearly throwing the surveyor into the ravine, but the sheriff intervened with a cold truth. Land grants favor married settlers. You want to keep your mountain? Get yourself a wife. A wife. The word tasted foreign on Silas's tongue. But land was land. And Silas would burn the world before he let another man stake a claim on what he'd bled to protect. So he did what many lonely men did in desperation, he wrote to a mail-order bride agency. The first bride lasted 4 days. She fainted when she saw Silas sharpen his axe at dawn. The second fled in the night, leaving behind only a single boot. The third threw a skillet at his head after he grunted instead of saying thank you. The fourth made it 6 days before he returned from hunting to find her rowing down a river, hair soaked and teeth chattering. The fifth bride didn't even unpack, she took one look at him, screamed, and demanded the sheriff escort her back. The sixth bride, a fiery redhead from Boston, marched up the mountain bragging she could tame any man. She lasted 2 nights. Thus, a legend was born. No bride survived 7 days with the Mountain Man. The townsfolk treated it like local sport. Bets were made. Songs were sung. One fool even etched Silas, 6, women, 0 on the saloon wall. Silas said nothing. He never defended himself, never apologized, never bothered to explain that he hadn't meant to scare them off. He merely existed the way nature made him, raw, untamed, intimidating. Deep down, though, something gnawed at him. Not loneliness, no, he'd long accepted solitude. What bothered him was the way they all looked at him like a beast, not a man. He didn't expect affection or tenderness, only respect. Was that so much to ask? Still, with winter closing in and the mining company circling like vultures, he swallowed his pride and wrote for a 7th bride. He didn't request beauty, charm, or grace. Those had brought him nothing but slammed doors and screaming exits. Instead, he wrote one firm sentence. Send me a woman with strength, of body or will, I don't care which. He sealed the letter, not knowing it would summon someone even the mountain itself wasn't prepared for. Someone who wouldn't flinch at his glare. Wouldn't tremble at his silence. Wouldn't run at his roar. For the first time in his life, Silas had no idea what was coming. The morning she arrived was unusually still, no wind, no birdsong, like the very mountain was holding its breath. Silas stood near the old wooden bridge at the base of the trail, leaning against a pine tree as he waited for the next foolish woman who'd soon be running back down screaming. But when the wagon appeared, his brows knit in confusion. The woman who stepped down wasn't like the others. She wasn't delicate, timid, or fluttery. She was solid. Grounded. Rooted like an oak. She wore a sturdy brown traveling dress that hugged her generous frame, and her cheeks were rosy from the cold. Instead of trembling, she lifted her chin at Silas with a look that said I've seen worse. You Silas McGraw? She asked, hoisting a heavy trunk from the back of the wagon without waiting for help. Silas grunted, a sound that meant yes in his language. Most women would have recoiled. She didn't. Beatrice Dawson. Folks call me B. She stuck out her hand. Silas stared at it like it was a rattlesnake. She didn't withdraw it. After an awkward pause, he slapped his hand into hers. Her grip nearly crushed his fingers. Strong, he noted. Like he'd requested. The wagon driver gave her a pitying look. Sure you don't want to reconsider, ma'am? Last one barely made it 2 nights. B smirked. I didn't ride 3 days to turn around because a man growled at me. Silas blinked. Growled? Before he could respond, she hiked her trunk onto her shoulder like it weighed nothing. She didn't ask for his help. She didn't wait for permission. She started walking up the trail, his trail, like it already belonged to her. Silas followed, more curious than annoyed, the cabin. When they reached the cabin, Bee didn't gasp at the skulls mounted above the door or the wolf pelt stretched across the steps. Instead, she nodded approvingly. Rustic. Drafty. Needs curtains. Curtains? Silas opened the door. Bee walked in, hands on her hips, scanning the dark, rugged interior, animal pelts, stone fireplace, and one massive bearskin bed. One bed? She asked flatly. Silas stiffened. You sleep. I take floor. She shrugged. Fine. You snore and I change my mind. He stared. She wasn't afraid. Not even cautious. Instead of unpacking daintily like the others had, she marched straight to the hearth, inspecting the cooking supplies with a deep frown. She lifted his frying pan, sniffed it, and wrinkled her nose. No seasoning? Not even salt? Sir, are you trying to die miserable? Silas said nothing, stunned yet again. She set her bag on the table, rolled up her sleeves, and declared, Right. I'm making stew. You, chop firewood. Silas blinked. She was giving him orders? He opened his mouth to object, but found himself stepping back outside with his axe in hand before he realized he'd obeyed. As he split logs under the cold afternoon sun, he heard her singing inside, loudly, cheerfully, like she'd been born there. It wasn't dainty singing. It was hearty. Bold. Unapologetic. Silas paused mid-swing. The last 6 brides had treated his cabin like a prison. Beatrice treated it like a challenge. And for the first time since he started this cursed wife hunt, Silas wondered who was truly being tested. By dawn of the second day, Bee had already rewritten the laws of Silas McGraw's cabin, without asking, without apologizing. Silas rose before the sun, as always, expecting to beat her to the morning chores. But when he stepped outside, axe in hand, he froze. She was already there. Skirt tucked up, sleeves rolled, splitting logs like she'd been born with an axe. Thwack. Another log cleaved in two. She didn't even notice him watching. She just wiped sweat from her brow and muttered, "City men complain more than this." Silas narrowed his eyes. Was she mocking him? Surely. Yet, strangely, he didn't hate it. Round 2, the water test. Determined to break her spirit like the others, Silas grunted, "Water," and pointed to the frozen creek half a mile downhill. He handed her 2 empty buckets, a deliberate challenge. It was heavy work, and most women had refused after one trip. Bee looked at the buckets. Then at him. Then shrugged and walked off without complaint. An hour later she returned, not with 2 buckets, but 4, hooked onto a yoke she fashioned from a fallen branch. Silas almost dropped his mug. She stomped past him with a triumphant smirk. Next time, try making it difficult. Round 3, the silent treatment. Silas had another weapon, his silence. He could go 3 days without speaking a word, even when people demanded answers. It had driven more than one of his brides to tears. So he ignored her. Completely. The rest of the day, he made no sound but the occasional grunt. If she asked a question, he turned away. If she offered food, he ate without acknowledgement. He refused to meet her eyes, but Bee didn't crumble, she improvised. If he wouldn't speak, she would. And oh, did she? She narrated everything she did. Loudly. Stirring the stew. Smells better than your old boot, I bet. Found 3 spoons, all dirty. Did a raccoon live here before me? Since you won't talk, blink twice if you're hungry. By midday, Silas's jaw twitched. By sunset, His eyebrow betrayed frustration. When she paused long enough for silence to settle, he almost sighed with relief, until she began singing hymns at full volume. That night, as she hummed while scrubbing pans, Silas slammed a cup on the table in surrender. "Enough." She smiled sweetly without turning. "Oh? He speaks." Round 4, the roar. Frustrated, mostly because he couldn't understand his own fascination with her, Silas played his final card. At sunrise, he stood in the doorway, blocking her path. His posture was wide, his expression thunderous. He inhaled deeply and let out a roar so loud it sent birds scattering from the trees. It was the same primal belle that had sent bride number 4 running barefoot through snow. Bee didn't flinch. Instead, she matched his posture, squared her broad shoulders, and roared back twice as loud. It echoed off the mountains. Silas blinked. She took a step forward and jabbed a finger into his chest. "I paid my fare to get here. I cooked your food. I chopped your wood. I'm not leaving because you think you're king of the wild." She leaned closer, eyes blazing. "You don't scare me, Silas McGraw. I've survived worse than a lonely man with bad manners." Silas stared at her. Not angry. Not insulted. Amazed. For the first time in years, he felt something other than irritation. He felt respect. The mountain was never silent, but for the first time, Silas heard it differently. Before Bee arrived, life had been a rhythm of crackling fires, swinging axes, and quiet meals eaten in solitude. Now there was singing in the mornings, humming in the evenings, and occasional pots clanging as Bee angrily lectured the cookware for betraying her stew. Silas found himself listening. Not just to her voice, but to her presence. Small changes, quiet battles. Bee didn't force her way into his life, she settled into it like she'd always belonged. She patched the ripped coat he hadn't bothered fixing in 3 winters. She swept the floors he tracked mud across for months. She even organized his tools, an act that nearly sent him into shock. "I had a system," he grumbled. "Your system was chaos," she replied without turning. Silas opened his mouth to argue. But then he realized he liked knowing where things were. The storm. On the 5th night, a storm swept through the mountains, sharp winds howling like banshees, snow battering the cabin walls. Silas was used to enduring such weather alone. But that night, he wasn't alone. He sat by the fire, sharpening his hunting knife out of habit, while Bee sat across from him mending socks. The storm raged, lightning splintered the sky, thunder rattled the roof. Yet inside, there was warmth. Silas glanced at her hands, quick, sure, capable. Then at her face, focused, calm, unfazed by the chaos around them. Without thinking, he spoke. "Why'd you come?" Bee didn't look up. "Didn't have much left where I was. A body like mine. Folks treat you like furniture. Meant to be used, moved, or ignored." Silas paused, knife still in hand. She continued quietly, "I figured if I'm going to belong somewhere, I'd rather it be a place that demands strength, not prettiness." Silas stared. She didn't dress her pain in pity. She didn't beg for sympathy. She stated it like fact. Same as he would. He put the knife down. Unexpected laughter. The storm worsened. Lightning struck near the cabin, shaking the ground. Bee jumped and instinctively dove behind Silas, clutching his arm. Silas froze, not from fear, but from pure disbelief. "Wasn't scared," she muttered, still holding onto him. Silas snorted. Actually snorted. Her head snapped up. "Did you laugh?" "No." "You did." Wind caught in my throat. Bee squinted. "Mountain Man giggles. I'll alert the newspapers." Silas glared, but there was no heat in it. The corner of his mouth twitched upward again. A soft shift. Later that night, when the fire burned low, Silas tossed her the extra blanket he normally used for himself. She blinked. "You'll freeze." He shook his head. "You snore. Keep bears away." She grinned. Was that a compliment? Sleep. But when she turned away, her smile lingered. And when Silas lay down on the floor, he found himself staring at the ceiling, unable to close his eyes. Something had shifted. She was no longer a burden to tolerate. She wasn't even just a wife for legal protection. She was companion. The morning after. When sunlight finally broke through, Silas did something he never did. He spoke without being spoken to. "Coffee?" Bee blinked in surprise. He cleared his throat. "Made some." She accepted the mug, eyebrows raised in amused disbelief. "So, the beast brings offerings." Silas looked away to hide his smirk. She sipped and sighed contentedly. "Careful, Silas. You keep this up, and I just might stay." He didn't respond. But deep down, he hoped she would. The seventh day arrived quietly, without fanfare, just a soft mist curling around the pines and sunlight filtering weakly through the clouds. To the people in town below, it was simply the day another bride would come running back down the mountain, crying or cursing Silas McGraw's name. They were wrong. Word spreads in town. At the general store, a group of men were already gathered, exchanging coins and laughter. Bet she lasted 5 days, tops. 4. She looked stubborn but not that stubborn. Old Mrs. Cranby snorted from behind the counter. "Mark my words, if she's still up there come sundown, that man won't know what hit him." They all chuckled. Suddenly, the bell over the shop door jingled. Every head turned. The walk into town. There she was, Beatrice Dawson, cheeks rosy, braid neat, stride steady. But she was not alone. Silas McGraw walked beside her, towering, silent, and peaceful in a way no one had ever seen. His usual scowl was softer, not quite a smile, but close enough to unsettle half the men in the room. A hush fell. Bee glanced at the gawkers, then announced loud and clear, "Morning. We're buying fabric. I'm making curtains." The store went dead silent. Curtains. Not return tickets. Not divorce papers. Curtains. Silas, noticing the shocked stares, narrowed his eyes. What? Never seen a man shop in before? The entire store suddenly remembered important tasks elsewhere. Confrontation turned confession. Outside, as they loaded cloth and nails onto the wagon, Sheriff Cutter approached cautiously. "So, you staying for good, Miss Dawson?" Bee didn't flinch. "Mrs. McGraw." Silas froze. Bee paused, looking up at him. "Unless that's not what you want." Silas's chest trembled, not with anger, but something deeper. He stepped closer, voice low so only she could hear. "Want you here more'n I ever wanted the land." Bee's breath caught. Silas cleared his throat, uncomfortable with his own honesty. "First time someone ain't run. First time this place felt like home for more than one soul. You fit like you were meant to." She stared at him, heart pounding. He shifted, uneasy. "Say the word. You stay, I'll try talking more. Maybe stop roaring before breakfast." She laughed softly. "And I'll try to snore less." Silas extended his hand. "Not like a business deal. Like a vow." Bee placed hers in it. He didn't crush her fingers this time. He held them gently. The legend rewritten. By sundown, news had spread across 5 towns. The mountain man's bride didn't just survive, she tamed him. No bride lasted 7 days. Until one chose to stay forever. Silas McGraw, married and smiling? But the truth was different. Bee hadn't tamed him. She understood him. And Silas wasn't softened by fear of being alone. He was strengthened by having someone beside him. Back at the cabin. As evening settled over Grizzly Peak, Bee stood on the porch, watching the sky blush pink. Silas joined her quietly, bringing 2 mugs of coffee. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. After a while, Bee nudged him lightly. You know, if folks start climbing this mountain trying to get a peek at you smiling, I'll start charging fees. Silas snorted. You're the scary one. They best be afraid of you. She leaned into him. He didn't pull away. The wind howled through the pines like it always had, but this time, it sounded like laughter. And for the first time in his life, Silas McGraw didn't feel alone.